Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us once again with Sarah Michehl from the Land Conservancy of McHenry County. Sarah is the Community Engagement Specialist there, and we, as always, are lucky and happy to have her with us tonight. I'm Katie. I'm from the Crystal Lake Public Library. I work in adult services there, and we're just excited to have Sarah here tonight to talk about buckthorn and how to handle it in your yard and the places you don't want it. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Sarah and get this set up so we see only Sarah.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to get my screen shared. Are you able to see my screen? We got it. All right. So thank you guys for joining us tonight. My name is Sarah Michehl. I am the Community Engagement Specialist with the Land Conservancy of McHenry County. And tonight we're going to be talking about invasive brush, battle against buckthorn and all of its buddies. And we're going to start at the very beginning, work through how to identify it, remove it, what to replace it with, okay? And exactly why this topic is so important to us all over the country. Honestly, this is a problem, and all over the world too. So we have folks joining us from a couple different areas tonight. So where the Land Conservancy of McHenry County is, and where the Crystal Lake Public Library is, we are in a county in Illinois, just south of the Wisconsin border. So about an hour northwest of Chicago, where that little red star is on the map there. And no matter where you are, there is a land trust near you. So what a land trust is, what we like to do as a nonprofit organization, we like to take care of land and preserve it, and we like to work with the landowners who want to do the same thing. And there's a whole variety of ways that you can do that. I mean, just as simply as watching this webinar tonight, you're engaging with a land trust. You could become a member of your local land trust. You can volunteer for them. We work with landowners in very formal ways through conservation easements, which is something that a landowner puts on their property to preserve it forever. Or maybe you just invite me over for a site visit and I help you develop a management plan or design a native plant garden, whatever it is. So there's a lot of different ways to engage with your local land trust and find out ways that they can support you and you can support them as well as a nonprofit. And so if you're not here in McHenry County, I suggest you go to findalandtrust.org. Type your zip code in, and it's going to take you to your nearest land trust. At the very end of this presentation, I have a resources slide, and my email address is on that. So you can always email me with questions as well. This presentation tonight is going to be recorded, and it is going to be uploaded to the library's YouTube channel, as well as the recording link will be sent to you as well. If you have any questions, go ahead, put them in the Q&A box. I'm going to go through that at the end, okay, and go through everybody's questions. So don't hesitate to put questions in there, and do not hesitate to reach out to me after the program as well. Okay, so let's start with the very basics of defining what is an invasive non-native species. So let's start with what is a native species, some kind of native plant. An example on the far right there is butterfly weed, beautiful orange milkweed that grows out in prairies. Native plants are plants that have lived in a certain region for thousands of years with no human intervention. So they're plants that have just grown here and evolved in a certain region with a certain set of friends or other plants and other insects and other trees and lots of things like that. So they've kind of evolved to be adapted to a certain set of conditions versus a non-native plant, like say the lilac over there on the left. Those originally, their native range is going to be around China. So that is a plant that we have put here, we have planted here, and it grows here and it's fine. But our local insects, they haven't lived with this plant for thousands of years. They're not able to necessarily eat the leaves of this plant. They haven't evolved a relationship over time with this plant. Then there's the category of invasive. So in the very center there, we've got an example of garlic mustard. So we're going to focus tonight on the non-native invasive species. So there's some non-native plants, like lilac is a good example, where it doesn't, when it's here out of its native range, it's not kind of growing in a crazy aggressive way and escaping into natural areas. And then there's some non-native species that do that, okay? Things like garlic mustard, buckthorn, honeysuckle, burning bush, so many other things that I'm going to talk about tonight, okay? So that's kind of the distinction between them. And there's no good plants and there's no bad plants. There's just the right plant for the right place, basically. All right, why are these plants here? Why are they outside of their native range? And it's usually because of us. We've chosen to bring them here as part of agriculture or as part of decoration in our yard. The horticultural industry is a huge contributor to non-native species being here. That's why buckthorn was brought here in the first place. That picture on the left there, it was brought here into the Chicago region originally as like to create privacy hedgerows along the North Shore estates of North Shore of Chicago. Grows quickly, densely, so enough people put that in that its population reached this critical mass and it just exploded and started taking over the understory layer in our oak woodlands. So why do we care about this? Basically, we care about this because our native plants can't compete, and so we lose them. For example, European buckthorn, Japanese honeysuckle, which we have both of those in this picture right here in the center. They come from climates that are a little bit warmer than here, and they leaf out earlier than our native shrubs and our native plants, and they continue to hold on to their leaves longer than our native stuff do. So they're blocking out a lot of light and they're really just taking up a ton of space. So nothing has room to grow. So we lose a ton of plant diversity, all right, which is not good. There's a lot of different kinds of insects that depend on all these little plants to be able to survive. Not just insects, but birds and mammals and everything. So let's talk about some of the wildlife effects that happen. Things like amphibians. So the salamander, the frog on the right there. Buckthorn actually gives off a chemical that leaches into vernal pools. Those little like temporary springtime ponds that develop in the woods, and they're so cool. That's the breeding zone for these creatures. So like a little frog is going to lay their eggs inside the pond, and then the eggs are going to hatch and it develops into a little tadpole, right? Well, that chemical from the buckthorn screws up the metamorphosis of that tadpole. Okay, so the tadpole is going to be like deformed in some way potentially. Same thing with the salamander larva. The cedar waxwing on the bottom left there, their tail feather colors are supposed to be yellow. That like little spot on the very bottom there, they're supposed to be yellow. And they found that when enough cedar waxwings, they're eating the bright red berries from honeysuckle, it's actually changing the color of their tail feathers. And birds depend a lot on the color of their plumage, especially males, to be able to communicate, okay, and give off signals, especially during the breeding season. So that has untold consequences. We don't really know exactly how much of an effect that's going to have. What they have found is that in oak woods or any area, it's not just like, 50 acres of oak woods, but even like the tiny little section in your suburban yard where you're like, oh, I stopped mowing it and there's a bunch of buckthorn and honeysuckle back there. They have found that when birds make nests in those shrubs, the structure of them, their lower branches, especially in the honeysuckle, is a lot stouter and sturdier than our native shrubs. So birds are building their nests lower, thereby opening them up to increased predation from things like raccoons. Okay, so that's affecting the way birds nest, the way they look, the way these amphibians are developing. It's affecting the ability of our oak trees to germinate, for their acorns to grow. There's no light reaching the ground. And what that affects are things like lepidopterans, fancy word for butterflies and moths. Okay, so butterflies and moths, they use oak trees as a host plant. What that means is they're laying their eggs on the leaves of oak trees because over thousands of years, they've developed a relationship with those oak leaves and their caterpillars can eat the oak leaves, okay? So as we have decreased oak regeneration, we're going to see a decrease in insect diversity as well. And all of these beautiful butterflies and moths, we're going to start to see major impacts on their population. Okay, so what do we do? This isn't all doom and gloom. There's plenty of stuff that you can do as like a normal homeowner with normal tools, okay? First, you need to learn to identify things, and we're going to go through that tonight. There's a book that I love called Invasive Plants of the Upper Midwest. The book itself is on back order, but there's a PDF that you can download if you just Google Invasive Plants of the Upper Midwest, and it's through the University of Wisconsin, and you can download the PDF. I think it's like $15 or something like that. This is an excellent resource, and I use it all the time. So once you've learned how to identify things, you need to remove them. And I'm going to go into how to do that. And then you need to replace them with native plants. If you don't put anything in there, whether it's plants or shrubs or trees, these invasives are going to come back, okay? One of the main ways that they move around is birds eat the berries from the buckthorn, the honeysuckle, the burning bush, whatever it is. They eat the berries, they fly away, they land in a tree, they poop the berry out, and there's the seed, okay? So birds are always gonna be doing this, and we're always going to be seeing these consequences. So we need to get competition in there, okay, in the form of our native plants. And then you just keep doing that year after year after year. And it does get easier after a while, okay? Especially after you get like a ground layer a dense ground layer of native plants going. It really starts to compete very well with some of the buckthorn and stuff. All right, so let's go into some identification first. Honeysuckle. Right now, they've still got their green leaves on them in the fall with the little pairs of red berries. I'll show you a picture. This is a very common sight, the top picture there, of the only green leaves existing. That entire bottom layer is all honeysuckle, okay, in that woodland. And that's just a perfect example. So in the spring, you see that around here. And then now in the fall too, after all of our trees, our native trees and shrubs have dropped their leaves, pretty much the only thing left green in there are the non-natives like honeysuckle. So identification. The main way that I identify honeysuckle is by the trunk. So if you look at that picture on the right, you can see the vertical striations on the grayish tan bark, okay? That's the main way that I identify honeysuckle. It's gonna have this very arching kind of rainbow growth habit to it. It's really pretty, unfortunately. It's really important that you start learning how to identify this stuff in the winter too, all right? Because a lot of the clearing work can happen in the winter. Right now, if you look down in the bottom lower left picture, you can see the leaves with the little berries on them, okay? That's how it looks right now. Earlier in the summer, in like late spring, is when you see those beautiful flowers. They could be white, they could be pink, like they're all different colors. And the stem, if you cut a stem, it's actually got a real hollow center in it as well. Okay, let's talk about buckthorn. Buckthorn, here's an example of like a glorious buckthorn hedge that is being maintained, mowed around, super common, all right? I see this all the time. Identification. Let's talk about how to identify European buckthorn. The main way that I identify it is, again, in the winter, by the buds. So if you look in the very bottom left corner, that picture, it says terminal bud with the thorn. So terminal bud, that just means the very end, like the last bud on the twig, okay? So notice in the very center, the thorn looking thing. And then on either side of that thorn, it's what looks like the two buds, it's what looks like a buck hoof. All right, that's what people say that looks like. So we've got the buck and the thorn. And when you're looking at the terminal buds of some of these buckthorn twigs, look at more than one, because a lot of times they're broken off for whatever reason. So just look at a bunch of them, okay? The leaves are gonna be like this egg shape, and they're very finely toothed along the edge, and they're a little bit glossy, all right? And they're hanging on to their leaves right now too. The fruits, a lot of them still have the little berries on them. They're that dark bluish black glossy berries. Okay, so look at the leaf picture again, that top center picture. The buds and the leaves are arranged in a way that is called sub-opposite. All right, so the stems aren't coming off of, so the leaves are not coming off of the center stem exactly opposite of each other. They're slightly offset, just a little bit. They're like almost opposite of each other. That's a really good way to identify buckthorn, because even after those leaves drop, there's still going to be buds there. So you'll see those little dark red buds kind of sub-opposite of each other, all right? And believe me, once you start doing this, you get really good at identifying buckthorn. There's plenty of it around to learn from. You can also scrape the bark, and the inner layer is going to be that bright orange color. And the young buckthorn, like the one in the bottom right corner there, young buckthorn is going to have, it looks like these like dot things, these like white dots on the bark. Those are just called lenticels. That's how air moves in and out. So you'll see that on the young buckthorn. Okay, and then that very bottom center picture is just like a carpet of buckthorn seedlings all over, all over the ground. Okay, so another very common invasive is also one of the most popular landscaping shrubs that people pay for and put in their property. Burning bush, okay? This is burning bush or winged euonymus. A way to identify it, well, right now, a lot of them are this gorgeous red color in the fall. And yes, they do make berries. So many, you can't believe how many times people say to me, do they make berries? Oh, they make berries. We've got a picture of it down there in the left corner. Birds love to eat them. And then the main way I identify them is by the little wings. So in that bottom right corner picture there, the outer like edge of the twigs are going to have those little wings or ridges on them. All right. Even the youngest little seedling burning bush just on the woodland floor is going to have those little wings. Okay. And I find that all the time. So yeah, what we're putting in our landscaping is 100% affecting nearby areas, whether it's on your property or somebody else's property, nearby natural areas that aren't being mowed. And I can't tell you how many times people say to me, my burning bush is an invasive. I've never noticed it spreading. It is, okay? It might not be in your yard because you mow your yard, all right? But if there's unmowed places in your yard that maybe have a tree nearby, a bird lands in your burning bush, flies to that tree, and excretes the seed, and they end up growing in these unmowed areas. I know here in Crystal Lake, you take a walk around Veterans Acres or Stearns Woods, a Park District owned property, burning bush all over the place, escaping from the nearby neighborhoods. And this is the case in our natural areas all over the place, all right? So they are listed as an invasive species. Here's another very common landscaping shrub, European high bush cranberry. There's the leaf in the bottom right, the beautiful red berries in the bottom left. They're hanging onto those berries right now. I can't even tell you how much of this I pulled out of my back. I have like a little half-acre section of unmowed oak woods in the very back of my property. Tons of this, tons of European high bush cranberry and burning bush. I mean, I live in a normal neighborhood. I live in like a subdivision and everybody has these things. So they're spreading all over the place. Okay. All right. So how do we deal with them? How do we control them? You've got a couple different options, and it all depends on the level of infestation that you have. So the most common method of removal is cutting them and applying an herbicide to the cut stump. We recommend, it's called cut stump treatment. So we recommend either a 41% glyphosate mix. So that's, if you literally Google 41% glyphosate, you're gonna get a bunch of different options. It doesn't matter what brand it is. It doesn't have to be Roundup. It can be some random generic brand that costs way less. You mix it 1-to-1 with water, and you can apply it with a paintbrush right after cutting. Don't wait till like the next day, okay? Do it within like half an hour. Apply that before that stump starts to seal up. You can buy a dye to put in the herbicide so you know which stumps you've treated. That's very helpful as well. Or you can use triclopyr, which is another herbicide. 13.6% is the active ingredient for it that we recommend. That's going to be the most effective, that triclopyr, as a cut stump treatment. If you do not apply an herbicide to a cut stump, the picture on the right is what's going to happen. It's going to resprout times 10. You're going to get a bunch of little stems all over the place. When that happens, that's a huge bummer. You got to cut all those individual stems and dab each little one with an herbicide. Okay. The cut stump treatment with the herbicide, you are not broadcast spraying the herbicide all over the place. This is a very targeted method of herbicide application. You do have some other options if you don't want to use herbicide. If you've got a ton of little first year seedlings, like those little tiny guys all over the place, I've done this. I've taken a propane torch and torched them, and it'll work to kill them. I mean, if you literally fry them with a propane torch. It usually only works on the first year seedlings, like the littlest ones. You can also use a weed wrench, that bottom right picture there, which is basically like a big lever. And you're levering out the shrub. So the buckthorn, the honeysuckle, whatever it is. This only works with smaller things, not with really big, extensive, deep root systems. And one disadvantage to the weed wrench is it's creating this like big crater. It's creating a massive soil disturbance, which can then unearth weed seeds. And then you end up with like a massive explosion of, say, garlic mustard, which I'm going to talk about. So to deal with this, what I recommend to people to do, if you're like really wanting to use the weed wrench, is stamp that soil down, that disturbed soil, and throw some native ryegrass seed in there. So things like Canada wild rye. It's cheap. I've got some places at the end of where you can order it from. So get some native seed in there that's going to germinate quickly within the first year to help compete. So it's not just like an explosion of garlic mustard, but there's other things in there to help compete. Okay. So some things to replace these native understory shrubs. And it's really important that we do that because there are all kinds of birds and butterflies and lots of different kinds of life that depend on these shrubs and trees that are growing 20 to 30 feet tall. There's different layers within the woodland ecosystem. It's not just the ground and then 80 feet up in the very canopy of the tallest trees. There's a whole middle layer in there that certain kinds of life prefer. So some beautiful replacement ideas that are native and would have historically grown in our oak woods are things like serviceberry. Now, I have this planted both as like a formal landscaping shrub as well as out in my woods, and it's fabulous in both situations. Okay, in like April or May, it's going to develop these gorgeous white flowers on it. It's got this really beautiful light gray bark. You can prune them if you want to. They're pretty forgiving. So the berries, you can actually eat them. So this is a really great buckthorn replacement idea. They get about 20 feet tall. Another example, and this is one that I usually recommend to people when they want to have some kind of like privacy replacement, because that's a big deal when you take buckthorn and honeysuckle and burning bush and whatever down, all of a sudden you're opened up to the road or your neighbor or whatever it is. So things like hazelnut grow pretty densely. And I've seen some outstanding examples of people planting hazelnut hedgerows, and they look phenomenal, okay? And if you've got more than one, you do get hazelnuts, which is really cool. So that little bottom picture on the left there. They have glorious fall color too. That picture on the top picture there is that reddish one. That's just an example. I mean, they're anywhere from like brilliant yellow to orange to deep red. It all depends on how much sun they get as to what their fall color is going to be, really. I've noticed the more sun they get, the more brilliant their color is. They can do full sun, they can do shade. If they're growing in the shade, they're going to be way leggier, basically. And when they grow in the sun, they've got a much kind of more compact, dense growth habit to them. Go to dogwood. This is such a glorious shrub. I love this one. It's so it is a dogwood, and it gets those beautiful white flowers on it in the early summer. This one's gonna do better in some shade. Okay, so not like blaring afternoon sun, but some like part sun to shade. This one's going to do really good in that kind of a situation. And they look best when you give them some room to spread out. All right. So I've got this one planted in a few different places in my woods as a future understory shrub replacement someday for all that buckthorn. Birds love the berries on this one too. Okay. So let's talk about this very common invasive plant found in on the ground layer of, it could be your landscaping, it could be out in your woods. This one, if you've got any shade, this is so common to see this, garlic mustard. The way we identify it is, for one thing, the leaves. If you just break a leaf off, crumple it up and smell it, it's super garlicky, oniony smelling, okay? And you can eat the leaves, especially when they're really young, like early in the season. People like make pesto out of them and stuff. So the first year rosettes have scalloped edges. All right, so look at that picture up on the upper left. First, what does that mean? First year rosette, like what? So garlic mustard is what's known as a biennial, okay? A biennial means it has a 2-year life cycle. First year, it's just that like group of leaves on the ground. That's basal rosette. That's what that means. Just like a group of leaves on the ground, okay? Then, if that plant is still there, the next year, it's second year, it's going to grow taller, and it's going to form a flower, all right? So like the white flower on the right there. It's gonna be a couple feet tall, something like that. And in like May, it's gonna flower. Now, since it is a biennial, it's gonna make seeds, but then those seeds are gonna drop, all right? The next year, that individual flowering plant won't be there. But all of its seeds that it's dropped, those seeds are going to develop, it all starts all over again into the first year rosette, okay? So a really great way to control garlic mustard is never let it make seeds, all right? And you do that by breaking off that flower head, mowing it down, string trimming it down. A lot of people pull garlic mustard, and if you've only got a little bit of it, go for it. But when you've got a ton of garlic mustard, like I had that as a problem in my woods, there was no way I was hand pulling all of it. There was absolutely no way. We ran a lawnmower or the string trimmer up and down this hillside, and within 2 years, I had like 95% less garlic mustard. So your goal is never let it make seeds. And right now, if you look down in the bottom right, that's what we see. If you never dealt with the garlic mustard, if it just, you let it grow, it's got all those little spiky things and the seeds are inside of there, okay? So if you go, and a lot of the seeds have already been dropped. They're like just these tiny little black things. So I encourage you to go look at it. And and start learning about this plant, you know, see if you can find the little seeds in there. The seed gets stuck on animal fur and whatever, and they get moved all over the place. The taproot is pretty deep on the garlic mustard, and so it's pretty easy to pull it when the soil is moist. And so it's important to try to get that entire taproot out if you can, okay? Don't leave garlic mustard, like after you pull it, don't compost it. Do not leave it just laying on the ground, all right? Because it could potentially reroot or still complete the flowering and seed making cycle, even pulled, which is insane. So we recommend putting it in a burn pile and burning it, or disposing of it with your lawn waste, or putting it in black plastic bags with a little bit of like water or something and leave it in there for like 6 months and let the sun just bake it. Okay, so all right, I kind of got ahead of myself. Pull, cut, and or burn. Torching those little first year rosettes. Can you tell I like to use the propane torch? Torching those little first year rosettes will kill them. Okay, so that's a fun thing to do too. Or just cut them, mow them, whatever you want to do. And then dispose of them like I just talked about. All right, so some replacement ideas for garlic mustard. Things like wild ginger. You guys, I can't even talk enough about this plant. All right, so I tell people it's kind of like the native hosta. It's not related to a hosta at all, except they're both plants. But the growth habit is similar, and they both like shade, okay? So here's a glorious example of ginger being used in somebody's front landscaping. It can be a very formal, beautiful plant, and it grows very densely, and it helps crowd out garlic mustard, okay? Better than a lot of other plants do. So this is a great one. It's got these cool heart-shaped leaves and this weird little red flower in May. It's super fun to like dig through the leaves and look for it. Another replacement idea for all situations except for standing water, okay? Pennsylvania sedge. That's that grassy, flowy, fountainy looking thing of beauty. I'm obsessed with sedges. Pennsylvania sedge, it develops this like very fibrous root system. It spreads slowly by rhizomes, okay? It's being used more and more by formal landscape designers because it can do sun, it can do shade, it stays under a foot. It's got this beautiful green color early in the spring when a lot of other stuff looks dead and brown. So like in April, this starts greening up right away. It's just a super versatile plant. And this is the plant that would have made up like 70% of the woodland floor, okay? So say your subdivision used to be an oak woodland, like in the 1830s and before European settlement, basically. This is the plant that would have been all over the place on the floor of an oak savanna or oak woodland. And it's gorgeous in formal landscaping as well. So every year I plug in some of these plants and they're great. Wild geranium, the light purple on the left or the red columbine on the right. Either of those are fantastic garlic mustard replacements as well. And they're just glorious and beautiful in the spring. They can do sun, they can do shade. I mean, they're extremely versatile plants. Tons of cool little insects have evolved to have relationships with them, and hummingbirds. I've seen hummingbirds at the columbine. It's just amazing the life that develops. So what else can we do? Besides removing these invasives and replacing them with native plants, you can become a nature ambassador, basically. And there's a variety of ways that you can do this. If you just like talk to somebody about what you've learned, like, hey, did you know that's buckthorn? And did you know that it has a negative impact on X, Y, and Z? There you go, you're a nature ambassador. Or you can take it a step further and join our Conservation at Home program. And this is a program that's being done all around the Chicagoland area. It was originally started by the Conservation Foundation in like Will, Kendall, DuPage counties. And then we've adapted it up here in McHenry County. It's being done in Lake County, all over the place. The fee for the program includes a site visit from me. I come over, answer your questions, give you suggestions, help you with identification. If you need help with coming up with a management plan for your oak woods, I help you with that. If you need help with just like a little native plant garden or something, I help you with that. As a land trust, we want to support you in doing these things, okay? Because what you do on your property affects everybody around you in all of the natural areas, all right? So we want to support you, and that's what Conservation at Home is all about. And if you've got native plants in your yard and you're at least making an attempt to get the invasives out, you qualify to get a yard sign, which is kind of a cool way to talk to friends, neighbors, whatever, about the benefits of the native plants, trees, and shrubs that you're putting in your yard. Now, people always ask me, well, I don't even have those yet. Will you still come to my yard? Yes, I will. I like going to the places where it's like nothing and they're starting from the very beginning, and you know, yes, absolutely. And then when you get some native plants in, I'll come back with the sign, okay? And the fee includes a 1-year membership to the Land Conservancy, which is fantastic. And that's how we do the work we do as a nonprofit, is through member support. Now, if you're not here in McHenry County and you're somewhere else, this program is being done all over the place, in Illinois, southern Wisconsin, over into Michigan. So if you need help locating your land trust and whether or not they're doing a Conservation at Home program, you can, oh look, here's a bunch of fun, cool people around the county that are participating. We've got over, I don't know, over 200 properties now that are participating in this. It's really cool. But anyway, you can email me. My email is down on the bottom right there, smichehl@conservemc.org. And I'll help you find your land trust and let you know if there's a Conservation at Home program or something similar that can support you in doing what you're doing. Okay, so on this slide are some examples of just places and websites and books that I regularly use to learn about this kind of stuff. Where to buy native seed, native trees, shrubs, all kinds of stuff like that. So the seed, there's some good recommendations in the top 3 there for upper Midwest native plants. We here at the Land Conservancy, we do a spring and a fall tree shrub plant sale. And in the spring, we do like rain barrels and composters too. And that's pre-order online, and then you come pick it up from our place in Woodstock in May. And if you're a member, you get 10% off, which is kind of cool. So we've got a bunch of stuff on our website, resources, all right, videos, webinar links. Check out our YouTube channel for some of our webinar recordings, virtual tours, you know, wildflower ID. We put together a lot of virtual things this year, and they're located on our website or our YouTube channel. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. I've got some other websites on there. We do a private Facebook group called LEARN, Landowner Ecology and Restoration Network. We administer it. Just join it, ask your questions. Like, what is this plant? You know, give us a picture of it. Like, how do I get rid of this again? And there's a bunch of knowledgeable landowners, botanists, restoration ecologists that jump on and give you some really valuable information that they find has worked for them, okay? And then I also do site visits and presentations as well for all different kinds of community groups, okay, around the region. So if you're interested in scheduling something like that, you can always contact me at my email address. Best way to get a hold of me right now, not the phone. Okay, so let's look in the Q&A box and see what kind of questions we have. All right, the McHenry County Prairie Trail between Crystal Lake and Algonquin is becoming overrun with buckthorn. Do you know if MCCD has any kind of program to control it? So yes, the Conservation District does a lot of invasive brush control. And they do have volunteer work days. So I would suggest going to the Conservation District's website, which is, I think it's mccdistrict.org. And they've got a whole section for volunteers and information on how to become a volunteer to learn how to remove brush and do things like that. Okay, so that's a great question. Katie, did we have stuff in the chat as well?
We did have a question from Liz. She wanted to know, do most local nurseries carry the sedge that you were talking about?
Not most of them. Countryside in Crystal Lake has started carrying sedges. So they've got a decent selection of native plants during the growing season. And they've started carrying sedges too. I've been working with them over the years, you know, like maybe you should carry these plants and these plants. And so they've started carrying them. You can also order them mail order too through like those 3 top nurseries on my resource list there. They all sell sedges and you can order them. We sell sedges in the spring too. There's a group called the WPPC who does a spring plant sale when it's not like coronavirus time. They do a spring plant sale at MCCD, or sorry, at McHenry County College. They do a spring plant sale like the first Sunday in May, and they always have sedges there too. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can get them. If that's too confusing of an answer for you, just email me and I'll send you some of my favorite ways to get them, okay? What else? Any other questions that you saw, Katie?
Just a comment from Megan. She says, Countryside recommended burning bush. I didn't know it was invasive.
Yeah, so pretty much every conventional nursery is going to recommend burning bush. It's very popular and it sells really well. And it's got a beautiful growth habit. And it's pretty hardy. I mean, it cannot handle the very late spring frost. So where it's native to in China and surrounding regions, it's a warmer climate than what we have here. And so it can't handle these like crazy late, like, you know, May hard frosts that we've gotten in the last few years. And that's why so many burning bushes died. And I've seen it all over the place. People like cut them way back. Sometimes they sprout back, sometimes they don't. Personally, I was really excited when I saw a bunch of them dying. So yeah, I know every nursery you go to, they're going to recommend burning bush. And so here's what I suggest you do. Before you buy a shrub from a nursery, take the name of the shrub, whether it's the common name or the Latin name. Better if you can do the Latin name. So Google burning bush and then put the word invasive after it. So be like burning bush invasive. See what comes up. Chances are it's going to bring you to this one website called Invasive Plants Atlas, I think. And it keeps a whole list of everything that's listed as invasive. And that's gonna tell you. So whenever you're at a nursery and you have a question, just take your phone, Google it, burning bush invasive, see what comes up. Because unfortunately, the horticultural industry, they sell a lot of things that are considered invasive because they're a business. And I understand, I understand why they're doing it. So, but it's on you to be an informed consumer. So very good observation, Megan. Okay, anything else, Katie, that we
Yeah.
missed?
Does anybody else have any questions? Now is the time. And we're lucky to have Sarah here to answer your questions live. But again, she said, email her too if you think of something after. We do have another question here from Carol Elkins. She said, any comments on barberry to share?
Yeah. Yes, don't put it in. Yeah, barberry. So that's got those little tiny crazy thorns all over it, and it's low growing. I had to limit the number of invasive shrubs that I put in here because otherwise we'd be here all night. But Japanese barberry, yes, super invasive. And you know what they're finding out east is that where they have more barberry taking over in their woodlands, there's a higher incidence of Lyme disease. Because what's happening is the dense layer of barberry is providing crazy amounts of shelter for the little mice that carry the Lyme bacteria. All right, so they're infecting the ticks, and then the ticks are infecting everything else. All right, it's crazy, the far-reaching effects that these invasives have on even us. I mean, Lyme disease is on the rise amongst the human population as well. Okay, so a replacement for barberry, those low-growing shrubs, I usually recommend something called dwarf bush honeysuckle. It is not a true honeysuckle. It's native. So that's one that I love. So you could, the Latin name is Durvilla lonicera. That's one that I love. It stays under 5 feet, and it's a great replacement for barberry. Okay. All right. Do you work with villages and towns? Yes, we absolutely do. So I have worked with the city of Woodstock, the village of Algonquin, the village of Trout Valley, in a whole variety of ways. So whether it's doing staff education for their public works department, or whether it's to reach out to some of their residents. Yeah, we work with towns. If they partner with us in a certain way, I can offer presentations like this through towns. I can do on-site programming for them, in a safe, socially distanced way. So yes, we work with municipalities a lot. Great question for that one too.
Let's see, the last thing I see here from Carrie, she says, may I share my hatred of Tree of Heaven? It is impossible.
Yeah, you may. I know, that's a really bad one too. And so luckily, this cut stump treatment method works on pretty much everything. There's a few things that you might need a different chemical for, but the vast majority, that triclopyr is going to work really effectively on things like the Tree of Heaven. I know, it's awful. It's really frustrating, and you feel like it's this constant battle, but I promise that 3 years in, you start to see the sun shining in, and you start to see beautiful flowers and butterflies and birds, and you see the results of all the hard work that you've put in, even if it's just a little pocket of a yard that you have. You can make a difference. It doesn't matter what size property you have.
That's a wonderful note to end on too, if we have no more questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you joining tonight. Find your local land trust, get involved, get their e-newsletter list, become a member, whatever it is, get involved with them, okay? And visit your local library.
Yay.
Find some of these books and these resources through your local library too. They've got a lot of them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. We always love having you. We always have such a great response from your programs. Lots of thank yous are coming in through the chat right now. So I'm sure we'll be having Sarah back at some point. We'll give her a little break for now. We just keep grabbing all the dates on her schedule. But thank you again, everybody, for coming out tonight and hanging out with us. Crystal Lake Public Library, if you are a member there, we do have limited hours right now for patrons to come in. You may have seen the appointment scheduler. You don't have to make an appointment. You can just do a walk-up and sign in right there. So if you've been missing your local library, if you've been missing Crystal Lake, we'd love to see you. Just be sure to bring your mask. And yeah, that's all the news we have here. So thank you again, Sarah. We so appreciate your time, and we'll be emailing this out to everybody. Oh, and some really great comments here. Sarah, you are an amazing and enthusiastic presenter. Thank you. As always, well done. So you got some big fans. We love it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody. Have a great night, and we'll hopefully talk to y'all soon. Bye.